straight from you. And each smile in every single sign, every minute detail, traces of you are found there. Wherever you are, I'll find you, 'cause you're the one I turn to. Wherever you are, I'll find you, 'cause you're the one I turn to. Wherever you be, I'll be with you, 'cause you're the one my heart is to. I need you. زمان الغريب قليل السكن، والليل الوحيد كثير الشجن. وحيث تكون سوف آتي، لأنك أنت اختيار حياتي. وحيث تكون سوف آتي، لأنك أنت اختيار حياتي. وحيث تريد وجودي يجود، فأنت كلامي عند سكاتي. يا رجائي شفاه تنير ليالينا، كأنك أنت ابتسام وطر، وأنت جمال على بيت شعر يردده ناس عبر الزمن على كلمات منك ذاب اغترابي، وأنسى بصوتك كل عذابي. وحيثما تكون يا رجائي شفاه تنير ليالينا، كأنك أنت ابتسام وطر.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, dear brothers and sisters. I welcome with me Dr. Hassan Lamy, joining me tonight on the Book of the World, Journeying with the Quran in 30 Nights. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like and thought. You can also follow us on Facebook, sydney.org.au. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. O Allah, teach us what benefits us and benefit us with what you have taught us and increase us in knowledge. The roadmap for tonight's session will take the following form. In the first section, I will introduce the notion of the fall and rise of societies. In the second participation of the first section, Dr. Hassan Lamy will provide a general scaffolding of Surah At-Tawbah. Then we'll go for a 5-minute break. After we return, I will introduce the concept of status symbolism and how rituals can be used as an instrument to build a particular form of pride in a community. And finally, Dr. Hassan Lamy will finish off with Prophet Mohammed sallallahu alaihi wa alihi as an active E. Without further ado, let us now move to Sheikh Mohammed al-Dihnawi for the first recitation of the Quran for tonight.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم كداب آل فرعون والذين من قبلهم كفروا بآيات الله فأخذهم الله بذنوبهم إن الله قوي شديد العقاب ذلك بأن الله لم يك مغيرا نعمة أنعمها على قوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم وأن الله سميع عليم كداب آل فرعون والذين من قبلهم كذبوا بآيات ربهم فأهلكناهم بذنوبهم وأغرقنا آل فرعون وكل كانوا ظالمين.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, dear brothers and sisters, welcome back. Let's begin together on this journey with the Holy Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ذلك بأن الله لم يك مغيرا نعمة أنعمها على قوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم وأن الله سميع عليم. God never stops dispensing His grace to people unless their souls rebel. God is all-hearing, all-seeing. In the Arabic language, we have a principle that says النقص في المبنى نقص في المعنى والزيادة في المبنى زيادة في المعنى. Meaning, when Allah says in the Quran ذلك بأن الله لم يك as opposed to لم يكن, this has a subtle meaning that I think helps us understand the concept of the rise and fall of societies. In Arabic, the more letters we have in a word, the greater the meaning. For example, we say sabara. This is a low degree of perseverance and patience. But when we say istabara, it gives a higher intensity of perseverance and a higher degree. Allah in this ayah says لم يكن مغيرا. So there is the lowest change Allah rules out from befalling a society if that society does not change towards its own destruction. In other words, the whole human drama, when it comes to the future of any society, depends on the choices and agency of its own people. And so we know in the worldview of the Abrahamic tradition that the stakes are very high and the outcome is uncertain. We also know that societies, just like individuals, have fates, have a life duration, a lifetime. When this lifetime comes to an end, this society dies, this nation dies. And historians have described this using different words and different descriptions. The rise and fall of the Roman Empire and whatnot, which means that these nations and civilizations have a particular lifetime, a particular life history. But to understand how nations and civilizations rise and fall, we need to look into the logic of history, into the laws of history, the trends of history. In the Abrahamic tradition, as I said, although the stakes are very high, there is always an ideal of justice to which a society ought to move and ought to reach. Having said that, no society will be able to reach that ideal in this world as long as it is struggling to approximate this ideal, to get closer to it, and to think outside of the box and even without a box to find new solutions to its problems. Although the outcome is uncertain, it is not a gamble. And should it be a gamble, everything would have been left to chance. But we know that the outcome, as the Quran presents it, depends on the understanding of the trends of history, which are also described as signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is a matter of knowledge and choice. So after establishing this principle, we ask the following question. If Tawheed across history has been a long-term struggle in society, why is it that Tawheed continues to be a challenge across human societies? Despite this significant learning curve, we continue to see a lack of full appropriation of the ideals of Tawheed in human society. The best example is racism in our day and age. As Alan Twinby said in his lecture about Islam from memory in Egypt, he said, despite all the civilizational achievements we reached in the modern age, the Western civilization continues to suffer from two primary diseases. The first one is alcoholism, and the second one is racism. And he said, Islam in its universality, the Abrahamic tradition, I nominate to be the future worldview that can contribute to settling these two diseases in human society. So again, how is it possible that the human being, despite this significant learning curve, continues to struggle and stumble on the way of understanding the ideals of Tawheed? I think Tawheed is a difficult concept, and just like in pedagogy, when you present a difficult lesson to your students, it's gonna take a long time for them to understand it. And this is part of the human drama and the divine plan in the creation of Adam. We ask the question, all these nations and societies across history that failed to live up to the ideals of Tawheed, was it because they were leading a sinful life that they failed to understand these values? Or was it because they were ignorant, which made them lead immoral lives and vicious lives, and hence failed to accept and implement the values in their societies? I think I would perhaps present the Quranic view from my limited understanding that it is not due to their sins that they were ignorant, but rather it is because of their ignorance that they led a vicious life. And so this social and moral complacency across history, which we even witnessed in religious societies that reached a point killing the prophets themselves who were sent subsequently to these nations, it is due not just to innocent ignorance but culturally constructed ignorance, which we call agnotology today. Particular groups and elites in society have vested interest in keeping the status quo as it is, and so refusing to change that society towards something better. So Tawheed comes in to provide us with a purpose, with a goal. And this goal allows us to achieve two things. Number one, to be focused in our energy in moving towards that goal. One of the meanings of shirk or polytheism in the sociological sense of the word is that sense of fragmentation and clash and contradiction that disallows the society from focusing on its major philosophy and major goal in life. That's one. Number two, when we don't have this clearly defined goal and purpose to which we strive, our energy will stagnate. Iq'ad. Our energy will remain in its state of a static position that is not moving. So on the one hand, we have this contradictory sense of conflict, and on the other hand, we have no movement in any case. So Tawheed provides us with this perspective. Let me put this into context in the modern day and age. Zygmunt Bauman, the Polish sociologist and one of the enlightening thinkers who passed away recently, in his book Liquid Modernity, he says, on one of my lecturing trips to a city in South Europe, as I arrived in the airport, one of the respected young academic ladies offered me to be escorted to the hotel. But she apologized at the beginning. Obviously she came, according to Bauman, from a wealthy social class, and she belonged to that affluent city. Bauman said she apologized from me that on the way to the hotel there's going to be heavy traffic and it's going to be tiring as we go through the actual CBD. And so Bauman says, in fact, it took us 2 hours to get to the hotel. But Bauman, as a sociologist, is intelligent enough not to allow this lady to give him a lift on the way back to the airport. Because a sociologist is interested in discovering the unspoken about of that city, in revealing the areas that are hidden from the sight of the tourists and from the sight of the visitors. And so on the way back, he thanked her for her goodwill and kindness, but he said, "Excuse me, I'll take a taxi on the way back." And he did. So Bauman said, the taxi driver dropped me off at the airport in less than 10 minutes. Although on the way to the hotel it took almost 2 hours. What's the matter? He said, as we reached the outskirts of the city, I realized that there were parts and spaces in the cities that are called slums, where poor people and marginalized people in that society live. He says, I would take a taxi, this time drive back to the airport in 10 minutes. But the taxi driver went along winding rows of shabby, God-forsaken slums, full of rather ill people and unwashed children in rugs. Bauman says at the end of this reflection, I noticed that in the mental map of this young lady, the rough districts of poverty and misery in that city were empty spaces. In other words, culture and society conditions us. It creates a mental map. In that mental map, there are certain spaces that are considered evil because of their lack of advanced social development. We are not told that this lack of social development, this lack of human development in these spaces is due to economic exploitation, is due to lack of access to clean water, is due to hidden policies of keeping the strangers on the margins of society. Nevertheless, how do we connect this to the ayah, my dear brothers and sisters? ذلك بأن الله لم يكن مغيرا نعمة أنعمها على قوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. It goes to remind us of a tradition that I find fascinating from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He once said, إنما أهلك أو إنما أهلك الذين قبلكم أنهم إذا سرق فيهم الشريف تركوه وإذا سرق فيهم الضعيف أقاموا عليه الحد. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, in past nations and societies, how did these societies perish? How were they destroyed? He says, إذا سرق فيهم الشريف تركوه. When a noble individual or a noble class commit theft, the society would turn a blind eye because they're respected in the eyes of that society.
And justifies it. But
when a weak person who comes from a lower social class, when he commits theft, they inflict upon him or her punishment. Isn't this an example of how a society, by doing a disservice to justice at the bare minimum of justice, which is one innocent individual who in the grand scheme of that society is considered a number, perishes? I'll finish off here. I wanted to give an alternative example, but inshallah I'll get back to this later. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. Let us now move to Sheikh Mohammed al-Dehnawi for the following recitation of the Holy Quran.
أحسنت.
براءة من الله ورسوله إلى الذين عاهدتم من المشركين فسيحوا في الأرض 4 أشهر واعلموا أنكم غير معجز الله وأن الله مخزي الكافرين وآذان من الله ورسوله إلى الناس يوم الحج الأكبر أن الله بريء من المشركين ورسوله فإن تبتم فهو خير لكم وإن توليتم فاعلموا أنكم غير معجز الله وبشر الذين كفروا بعذاب أليم.
Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Thank you, Akh Muhammad, and again thank you to Muhammad Sadiq, our media person. Before I start my part, I would like to pass my condolences on the demise of Sayyidah Khadija Salamullah alayha, the great wife and friend and supporter of Prophet in his mission. I would just mention one hadith to commemorate her remembrance. There is a hadith in Musnad al-Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal where Aisha radiallahu anha narrates the following hadith from Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam. she says that إذا ذكر خديجة أثنى عليها. Whenever he remembered Khadija salamullah alayha, he praised her, he glorified her. فأحسن الثناء, the best type of praise and glorification. Then one day, Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, tells Prophet that فقلت ما أكثر ما تذكرها حمراء الشدق. And whenever you remember her, you just turn red in your face. قد أبدلك الله عز وجل بها خيرا منها. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah azza wa jal, has replaced her with someone better than her. Then Prophet replied, قال ما أبدلني الله عز وجل خيرا منها. That indeed God not has replaced anyone better than her. قد آمنت بي إذ كفر بي الناس. She believed in me and she had faith in me while everyone disbelieved me. وصدقتني إذ كذبتني الناس. And she trusted me while everyone considered me as a liar. Everyone rejected me. وواسدني بمالها إذ حرمني الناس. And she supported me with full heart and support while everyone deprived me, all the people deprived me of their support. ورزقني الله عز وجل ولدها إذ حرمني أولاد النساء. And from her God blessed me with فاطمة الزهراء إنا أعطيناك الكوثر. Fatima al-Zahra salamullah alayha, where this progeny continues on, where you have the pure progeny of Imams coming from this blessed daughter, while other wives could not basically give me this child. So inshallah we follow this great role model in history. As Prophet said, everyone disbelieved, she believed. Everyone deprived him, she gave with full heart. And we can develop this love and passion and compassion towards our religion, our goals, and the rest of humanity. I would like tonight, instead of talking about the verse, to talk about Surah At-Tawbah. And the reason being, Surah At-Tawbah is considered as one of the most controversial surah or chapters, whereby many anti-Islamic movements and people who are against Islam use the verses in this surah to prove that Quran is or Islam is a religion of violence, and the spread of Islam was through swords. So I want to focus in the next 10 minutes or so on scaffolding of this chapter to show how lack of understanding of the context, first the context of the chapter, and second is the historical context, can mislead us in understanding even as Muslims. Firstly, the Surah At-Tawbah, Tawbah means to return. In the religious context, means to return to God. So Tawwab is both the name of us as human beings, meaning returning to God, and also is the name of God, Tawwab, meaning returning to us. The name of this chapter is taken from verse 112, where some of the attributes of mu'mineen is mentioned. The context of the surah, the historical context, goes back to between the years 6 to 8 after migration. So Muslims on the 6th year of Hijrah after migration, they had, after a long process and lengthy process with the mushrikeen of Mecca, had a peace treaty known as Hudaybiyah, because it was done at a place known as Hudaybiyah, with the mushrikeen, whereby there was this peace treaty, this agreement. You can look it up online, Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, about 10 to 12 articles of this peace treaty, whereby they agreed to have absolute peace between the two parties and not to attack any of the tribes that are related either to Muslims or Mushrikeen, and at the same time they can engage in normal business transactions, and there is no as they say nowadays, sanctions on each party. So both groups can function normally without engaging in further wars and further attack on each other. So both parties agreed. But what happened about 2 years later? The Mushrikeen, through the help of another tribe, they attacked the Bani Khuzā', who were one of the basically tribes united with the Prophet. As a result, the verses came down, and that's why the verses start bara'atun min Allah, bara'atun, that God and Rasul, they are, most of translation says that they have like a sort of dissociate is the better term to be used. So there is that sense of dissociation. Why? Because there was this peace treaty was not upheld. It was broken. It was not fulfilled. So in this context, Prophet orders Imam Ali alayhi salam to take this message, the first few verses, and to read it and announce it during the Hajj al-Akbar. Why this was done? Because obviously back then there was no social media, there was no broadcasting. One of the ways that they had was to go to Hajj al-Akbar, because that's where people from all different tribes and nations come. So Imam Ali was given this order to go and announce it, and to give Mushrikeen 4 months in order to see what they want to do. If they want to return to the peace treaty, they have to return, pay the compensation for the people they've killed, pay the compensation for the damages they've done, and uphold the peace treaty. If they don't uphold the peace treaty, now the war starts. Let alone back then, even now, if a peace treaty is broken, that's it, a war will start. Back then was even worse, because it's a tribal. There was no united nation, there was no like gathering or councils that we see nowadays. It was a tribal mentality, especially if a peace treaty was done, which was very less likely. Not many peace treaty happened back then.
Let alone no international law.
Exactly, there was no, even not national laws, let alone international laws. So they would engage in wars. That's why the surah does not start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Why? Simple example. Imagine a teacher enters a classroom, and all the students in the classroom, despite having this implicit agreement to behave according to student etiquette in the classroom, they're fighting, they're having arguments. When the teacher enters, he's not going to show a face of mercy and smile. Rather, there's going to be that sense of disappointment, where the teacher wants to basically show that sense of anger and that sense of disciplining. And that's how the context of the verse starts. One of the things that usually those who are against Islam and they want to cherry pick the verses is verse number 5. They pick verse number 5. If you have verse number 5, please open it. I just go back to verse number 5. Sorry. So verse number 5, which they usually recited without showing back the previous verses and the verses after. فَإِذَا انْصَلَقَ الْأَشْهُرُ الْحُرُمُ. So when the sacred months have passed away, فَاقْتُلُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ حَيْثُ وَجُدْتُمُوهُمْ وَخُذُوهُمْ وَاحْصُرُوهُمْ وَاقْعُدُوا لَهُمْ كُلَّ مَرْصَدٍ. Then slay the mushrikeen, the polytheists, wherever you find them, and take them captives and besiege them and lie in wait for them in every ambush. When I read this without any context, and let's say I'm not a Muslim, if I'm not a Muslim, I'm mushrik by default, then فَاقْتُلُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ. So it means Islam is a religion of violence. The only reason they're not killing me is because now they don't have the power. They're not in majority. They don't have the authority. But the moment they get the power and the authority, فَاقْتُلُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Kill them, slay basically the polytheists. But that's without reading even one verse before it. If you go the verse before it, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آحَدتُّم مِّنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ ثُمَّ لَمْ يَنْقُصُوكُمْ شَيْئًا وَلَمْ يُظَاهِرُوا عَلَيْكُمْ أَحَدًا فَأَتِمُّوا إِلَيْهِمْ أَحْدَهُمْ إِلَى مُدَّتِهِمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَّقِينَ. As you can see, the reason is not ideological as they present, that it is an ideological war to make the other Muslim. No, it says that it's one verse behind it. I'm not going like 10 verses behind, 10 verses forward, opening book of history. It says that except those of the polytheists with whom you made an agreement, then they have not failed you in anything, meaning they did not, for example, attack the Bani Khuzā in this context, and have not backed up on anyone against you. Because what the mushrikeen did, they did not directly attack Bani Khuzā. They got another tribe, I think Bani Bakr, if I remember correctly, they got them to attack it. So it wasn't a direct attack, but it was still going against the peace treaty. So fulfill their agreement to the end of their term, because the term was about 10 years. Surely Allah loves those who are careful to the duty. We talk about al-muttaqin, self-control. Sometimes we lose this self-control because we want to exhibit this authority, but Quran says that as long as they have this fulfillment towards the peace treaty, you should uphold this peace treaty. In other words, the issue, the fight, the war is not ideological. Rather, the fight and the war is at the safety and security level, because you had an agreement for 10 years and now this agreement has been breached to the level that the tribe whom you are united with, the men of that tribe, they have been killed, they have been attacked. Now you need to defend yourself. That's why the tone of the verses is to basically tell Muslims, have a bit of sense of ownership and citizenship in the modern sense of understanding as we have, to defend your religion, to defend your people. So
the purpose is peace.
The beauty is when we go to verse 12, again that's which shows إنهم لا أيمان لهم لعلهم ينتهون. The aim is so this war may stop. It is very interesting. So the aim of all the wars in Islam are defensive. We don't have attacking wars. It's always defensive. But what's the purpose? لهم لعلهم ينتهون, that they may desist, they may stop the continuation and propagation of war. So even the psychology of defensive war is not to expand territories, rather to promote peace and stop the furthering of the wars in the region.
And contain violence.
Exactly, so contain violence, because sometimes if you don't defend, you're just giving a green light to the enemy to attack me further.
That's right.
And we've seen that, without mentioning the names, in the last 2-3 decades, we've seen examples. The moment you don't defend, you get attacked multiple times because you're found as a very easy target and victim.
As they say, you know, if you don't have me for lunch, I'll have you for dinner.
Exactly. And that's the reality. There was a research done by one of the British scholars, and it was about basically that was the culture there. Back in Arabic Peninsula, the culture was, if I don't attack you, I'll be attacked.
That's right.
But even this is not in this context. There was a peace treaty that was breached. Even in the common international laws nowadays, it is well recognized and well understood and reasonable. And in the message that Imam Ali took in the Hajj al-Akbar to announce it, they were given 4 months in order to come back to this discipline, to come back to this peace agreement that they had. So I would stop here. There is more to say about the structure of the verse, of the chapter, but what I wanted to basically get here, we require to read verses in its context. You cannot isolate and cherry pick. Read it in the context and understand it. And as you saw, verse 5, which is commonly posted, discussed, argued, and Muslims are basically attacked based on that. Just by going one verse behind it, we realize it is not an ideological war. It is based on safety of the region, security of the region, peace agreement, the peace treaty, in order to promote peace in the region.
Very beautiful. Thank you very much, Dr. Hassan Lamy, as always, for your contextual reading and presentation of the Quran. Let us now go for a 5-minute break, and then we will return to our program tonight, inshallah.
Close to you, but everything fell apart the moment I strayed from you. In each smile, in every single sigh, every minute detail, traces of you are found there. Wherever you are, I'll find you, 'cause you're the one I turn to. Wherever you are, I'll find you, 'cause you're the one I turn to. Wherever you be, I'll be with you, 'cause you're the one my heart is to. I need you. زمان الغريب قليل السكن، والليل الوحيد كثير الشجن. وحيث تكون سوف آتي، لأنك أنت اختيار حياتي. وحيث تكون سوف آتي، لأنك أنت اختيار حياتي. وحيث تريد وجودي يجود، فأنت كلامي عند سكاتي. يا رجائي شفاه تنير ليالينا، كأنك أنت ابتسام الوطن، وأنت جمال على بيتي يا رجائي شفاه تنير ليالينا كأنك أنت ابتسام وطر.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, our dear brothers and sisters. I just wanted to remind you to participate and share your comments and thoughts about the question of violence in light of the defensive jihad as presented in the Quran.
And look through the verses of Surah At-Tawbah,
Exactly.
where the tone is, it seems violent, seems that there is that degree of fighting.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we recommend that you, interact with Surah At-Tawbah and try to read it from the start to the beginning. It helps us to understand the context behind it and become, confident and equipped in knowing how to present it and how to respond to the restless questions about Islam and violence out there. So thank you once again, Brother Hassan. I just wanted to quickly continue my part from the first intervention or participation I made. I said Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam provided us with this compass to allow us to understand how past nations were destroyed. إنما أهلك الذين قبلكم أنه إذا سرق فيهم الشريف تركوه وإذا سرق فيهم الضعيف أقاموا عليه الحد. And unfortunately we see this in our day and age across different societies. People who usually come from a humble background, from a humble social class, are the ones who are labeled and stigmatized, and are the ones who are not given the benefit of the doubt. We don't even look at their situational factors. We always say, because we believe in the idol of meritocracy today, that you receive what you deserve. We fall into the trap of saying that people in this marginalized social class deserve that situation and that class because it's all about effort, and hence they did not make the effort to reach as others did. So again, the point I want to reach and finish off with is Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun, out of inspiration from the Quran, had a brilliant theory about the rise and fall of civilizations, families and societies. I'll just mention the 4 stages he mentioned, and I would like you to comment on this and share your thoughts. Stage number 1, the first generation creates and innovates. Stage number 2, the second generation produces by observing the first. The third generation just imitates, taqlid, as we do today. We just consume anything.
وجدنا آباءنا.
Absolutely. وجدنا آباءنا على أمة. The fourth generation, which is also us, does nothing and simply lives off the wealth which it sees as its rightful inheritance of previous generations.
That's how we collapse.
And that's how we collapse. Now you may ask me, give us an example from our contemporary technological society. If we look at the history of the relationship between man and objects, including technology, we will notice it experienced 3 stages. Stage number 1, I call functionality. The human being extended its capability by innovating particular tools and machinery that help them achieve what is beyond their capacity. I have a limited muscle power. I cannot, destroy this table. But I can invent something that helps me destroy it. That's functionality. We invented tools to make our life easier. Stage number 2, we call identity. Now, what we invent is no longer serving a functional purpose to make our life easier, but is rather a thing with which or through which we identify our own personalities, characters, and philosophies in life. One example is iPhones. Have you ever reflected on why, perhaps this is not something too discussed out there, but food for thought. Have you ever reflected why the letter I comes before the phone? We know that an I stands for an identity. And so a phone or a brand is no longer a phone to help us navigate our way and achieve convenience. Obviously it does this job, but it extends beyond that. It gives us a status, it gives us an identity. So that's the second stage. But the third stage, which I believe is more dangerous, is what I call enslavement, where no longer is the phone a function
Serving.
or an
Rather,
identity,
we serve the phone.
but rather the phone now looks at us as a function to its own ends and its own purposes. That's why in Hollywood today, all the scientific fiction films are no longer fiction. They're actually talking about a reality we are approaching. Take, for example, the film, and by the way, I'm not trying to promote here the film in its philosophy, but this is an important thing for us to know, the spirit of our times. Look into the film titled Her, H-E-R. This film, in a nutshell, talks about a man who falls into love with a machine. Obviously, he goes through family issues, family problems. I think he's a successful corporate individual. But towards the end of the film, the producer and the script writer shows us the reality of our time, which is already happening. It's no longer fiction or the future. He says, this man falls into alienation, into a feeling of this existential disappointment. He realizes that this very same machine, which had a feminine voice that was organizing his daily life, had fell in love with others other than him, and so there was no meaning anymore. But he found his only sense of belonging in that machine, which goes to show us that machines are no longer these functional devices that we are using, but rather have a great impact on shaping our emotions and psyches. You may ask, give us an example of an alternative community that exemplifies something hopeful about the future. As the Quran says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Give us an example of a community living in the modern age that was capable and continues to be capable of controlling its own fate. I would nominate the Amish community, which settled in America in the mid-18th century. Now, the stereotypical view of the Amish community is that it is a living museum of an older age. It's anti-technology, it's anti-modernity, which again is a very hasty and superficial understanding of this community. In fact, scholars such as Kevin Kelly, they say we had to make these waters of stereotypes muddy with our ground-breaking research that changed this stereotype about the Amish community. He discovered with other scholars that this community actually has what the Quran calls حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ, towards the good, not the bad. Till this day, they still preserve their culture without being disconnected from modernity. And the secret is that they start with the things they value most. For example, family and community. And then they work backward to ask whether a particular technology will bring more harm or good in relation to these values. One example is ownership of cars. When they started discovering that people in their community started owning cars, not just using cars, they noticed that these people on the weekend were traveling outside of the community to do picnicking and sightseeing. And so the local businesses were affected, because on Saturdays in the Amish community, you had to support the local businesses. You had to keep it running. This was a social responsibility. It wasn't individualism.
Mm-hmm.
And so on Sundays, which was a day dedicated to visiting the elderly and the sick, people started skipping.
Mm-hmm.
Once they felt that they have freedom to travel outside of the land and the region, all these obligations and values started deteriorating. And so they came up with a value and a law that no one is allowed to own a car, but anyone is allowed to drive in a car. So again, this is an example for us to think about today. I will not go to the other verse because we ran out of time. I'll pause here. Inshallah, tomorrow we can continue the other verse that I wanted to touch on. Let us now finish off with Sheikh Mohammed al-Dehnawi for the final Quran recitation for tonight.
أحسنت.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. أجعلتم سقاية الحاج وعمارة المسجد الحرام كمن آمن بالله واليوم الآخر وجاهد في سبيل الله لا يستوون عند الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. الذين آمنوا وهاجروا وجاهدوا في سبيل الله بأموالهم وأنفسهم أعظم درجة عند الله وأولئك هم الفائزون.
Thank you, Akh Muhammad, again. Thank you to our dear audience, viewers and listeners. So now I come to verse 61 of Surah At-Tawbah. وَمِنْهُمُ الَّذِينَ يُؤْذُونَ النَّبِيَّ. And amongst some of the companions who are basically in the shape of munafiqeen, because this chapter discusses again 3 types of religiosity that we talked in the first session. It's a recurring theme in Quran, in history, in society. Al-Mu'minun, Al-Munafiqun, Al-Kafirun. Anyhow, amongst these companions who basically in their heart they are disbelievers, but outwardly they are believers. Some of them who molest and annoy, yu'udhun, they hurt. Here yu'udhun is more like a hurtful comment rather than hurting physically. As we know, hurtful comments and talk is more devastating and more detrimental than physical hurt.
And as you know, the difference between the word soul and the word is a S.
Yes, exactly. And word, logos or kalima, is actually something that leaves a scar behind. وَيَقُولُونَ هُوَ أُذُنٌ. And they say he's in his entire existence an ear, meaning he just listens to everyone, and na'udhu billah, he is naive and believes everyone. Why? Because the verses are about advocating and encouraging Muslims to go and defend. As we said, the peace agreement was breached, but the Muhajirin, because this is in the context of Tabuk as well, the war of Tabuk, but the Munafiqeen, they came to Prophet, talked to him extensively, arguing and bring up different excuses. This is the month of farming, this is the month of being basically ripping of fruits and so on and so forth. And Prophet, as the Quran says, we go along, he based on the notion of belief, because they're part of the Muslim community, he believed them. قُلْ أُذُنٌ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. This active listener who is lending his ear freely and with self-reflection is much better for you. يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ, he believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and yu'minu is not only to religion, وَيُؤْمِنُ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and he believes and trusts the faithful people of this community. They say one of the famous priests, I forgot his name now, but he's basically the founder of natural ethics in Christianity, and most of the theological discussion of Christianity come from him. I just forgot his name now. They say once one of his disciples, one of their students, told, "Oh teacher, someone is flying in the skies." He went to the window and looked into the sky, and then his students asked him, "You such a philosopher, theologian, smart person, how would you believe someone is flying in the sky?" He said, "For a priest or religious person, for me to lie is much harder to believe than someone flying in the skies. So I can believe someone flying in the skies, but someone from this community who basically is leading people, I won't believe they're lying." Integrity, exactly. وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. So we are doing 61, verse 6 on Surah At-Tawbah, and He's a mercy. Rahmah, and it's, as we discussed it in multiple times in previous sessions, to those who have entered this city of tranquility. وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْذُونَ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ, and those who hurt him and molest him with the comments and with the talk, لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ, and for them there is indeed this punishment, this painful punishment. Here, if you remember in previous nights, we talked about one of the traits and virtues of the Prophet, the virtue of gentleness, the virtue of softness. And we established this principle: no prophet from Quran. We can achieve about 10 to 12 virtues in Quran, and then go to books of history to know the details. Here we have another virtue which gives us a moral compass, and that is the virtue of udhun, active listening. When I was looking at the book of virtues, this active listening can be also understood as the sense of understanding of the other, which can happen at 3 levels: understanding in terms of this space, time, and spiritual. Because you want to be understanding at the 3 levels. So what is this virtue of active listening? Which, as one of the TED talks about active listening said, we are losing active listening. We are losing our hearing. And sound is very interesting in terms of its physics. It actually helps us to detect our position in space. It helps us to detect things around us. It helps us even to detect ourselves and make sense of ourselves. So when we look into the virtue of active listening and understanding, we realize it is closely connected to one of the fundamental needs of a happy life, and that is sense of belonging. Sometimes people want their friends or their beloved to listen, not to give them solutions. We always think that we have to come up with genius solutions to solve an issue, but they don't want that. They just want someone to be there, actively present in space, time, and heart, in the spirit, to listen, where they can pour their heart into someone else's heart. So it is the notion of belonging, sense of belonging. In many psychological studies, it's known, it's one of the factors. In one of their studies, they found 10 factors for a happy life. One of them was sense of belonging. We want to be liked. We always seek others people to like us. No one wants to be hated. This is a natural tendency. It is
social acceptance.
social acceptance, exactly. So active listening, they say, is a way to maximize well-being. Not only the well-being of the other, of the community, rather the well-being of the self as well. When you are actively listening, when you're actively present. And social relationships, where there is active listening, these relationships are fostered to the next level. And Prophet is teaching us, again, how to be a leader. Because usually we are used, leaders come, talk, they pass to us advice and they go. And usually they sit on a higher level. Even at a physical the situation and setting, they're higher. Rarely you get time to go sit down and you feel like you are at the level of the leader.
Like kings in history.
Exactly. You always have to have this barrier. But we know in history, women used to come to Prophet and they used to complain about the most intimate things in their life to Prophet. And Prophet used to sit down and listen to them actively. And Prophet, we know if you go to Masjid Medina, Masjid Nabawi, there are different pillars and each pillar is for something. And one of the pillars was the pillar where people used to come and complain and open their hearts. And Prophet used to sit there like an udhun, actively listening. So here we need to minimize physical noise, which unfortunately because of the technology we have so much physical noise, and also physiological noise. Because most of the time when we are listening to the other, so many things is going in our head. Either we are thinking about our own stuff, sometimes we think about our grocery list while the other is talking. So here I want to provide two things. One, 4 mistakes that we do in listening. That when we look at the life of the Prophet, we see that how he engaged in active listening, and then some recommendations how to promote active listening. Number 1, in terms of the mistakes that we do in listening, is daydreaming. We're not actually there. Physically we're there, but our mind is somewhere else. Either we're thinking about our assignments, exams, duties that we have, daydreaming. Number 2 is you think of what to say next. You're not even listening to the other. You are forming your argument before even the other finishes. Even if that argument is something you think is beneficial, like you want to give a solution. The other person is crying, is giving you what's happening to them. You want to treat that session as a therapeutic session in order to provide therapy. So that's the second issue. The third issue, you're judging what is being said. You're, as they say, we are living through some filters, cultural filters, religious filters, gender filters, societal filters, so on and so forth. So you're already making judgments while the other person is talking. For example, oh, this person is weak, or this person is just being hyper emotional, or this person is just overreacting. And the fourth is sometimes we listen with a specific goal and intention. So we come to listen, but we have our own agendas. So we need to try and minimize these 4 common mistakes that we do in active listening. Munafiqeen, they saw this as a weakness in Prophet. They said that يَقُولُونَ هُوَ أُذُنٌ, he's an entire ear, but he's actively there listening, not daydreaming, not there to quickly respond, not there to judge, rather he's there to be with you. Now, because we are short of time, I wanted to provide what this is taken from the business and sales per people, what they call AEL, active empathetic listening. How you can have an active listening where you show sense of empathy and compassion. Probably I would leave that to another session, but I would like to finish with one of the most famous strategies in active listening, and I would pass it to you, Akh Mohammed, because you've written on this issue, the acronym of RASA, in order to help the notion of active listening.
Sure, thank you very much, Brother Hassan. So RASA stands for receive, appreciate, summarize, and ask. If we can achieve these 4 stations of active listening, I think we would become more empathetic.
So R is about receiving the information actively.
That's right.
And A is about
appreciate. So basically saying, okay, I understand, I see your point. Yes.
And S is about
summarizing,
paraphrasing, to show that you were there, you understood, and making sure. And A is about
asking. If you're really interested in what the other just said, you gotta ask to demonstrate.
Not just jump and give a solution.
Give a solution, absolutely.
Exactly. A Socratic method of listening. Anyhow, tell us about this virtue of active listening. Please share with us your stories, or what you may find beneficial for us to as well implement in our daily life. And with that, we leave you in the hands of God, and inshallah you remember us in your dua. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
My best times were when I felt close to you. Everything fell apart the moment I strayed from you. In each smile, in every single sigh, every minute detail, traces of you are found. Wherever you are, I'll find you, 'cause you're the one I turn to. Wherever you are, I'll find you, 'cause you're the one I turn